a mountaintop. Oh, I love it soars, wider than expanding space. There's no limits no more. It goes deeper than the ocean floor.
I think we can get to 7.
I think we can do them all.
I think we can get to 7 at least.
I mean, I appreciate the wishful thinking, but 4 is gonna be probably.
Because I feel like 9 and 10 are gonna be the big ones. The lying and the coveting.
I mean, I'm gonna make all of them big because you shall not commit murder.
I mean, but then
Hold up, y'all ready for this comment? We murder each other every day with our words.
That's exactly wrong with that.
With our words, with our thoughts. I mean,
Sharp, what is it? Sharp edge sword?
I'm just saying.
Yep.
You shall not commit, thou shalt not commit adultery. I can get in there on that one too.
Yeah.
You feel me?
Alright.
Because you know the spectrum is from actually committing the act to even thinking
jumping
the
in the
act.
DM.
So I'm just giving, I bet you've already started this, haven't you?
I definitely have. My best footage is always right before.
Oh man. Well, since we already going, welcome back to Christ and Culture, where we're gonna be doing part 2 of the 10 laws of power. To my left, I got
Alvona.
to my right,
Nicole.
and they got to her right.
Jelani.
Yep, and we got you guys' favorite voice back on the pod, Miss Janine Williamson. So we're just gonna continue with our discussion on the 10 Commandments, and where we left off, our last episode we talked about 1 through 3. You shall not have other gods before me. You shall not make idols, and you shall not take the Lord's name in vain. Mm-hmm. Now, we're about to get into that big one, the 4th. Remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. I always started it off, so I'm gonna open it up to whoever wants to speak. Oh yeah, we also got our fly on the wall. So he who shall not be named. All right.
I like that.
So, who wants to open it up about, remembering the Sabbath and keeping it holy?
Yeah, I want to start because
Get to it then, sister.
I go back and forth with this commandment, and not like I'm not going to do it, but in a good way. I used to feel like keeping the Sabbath was a commandment, a rule, something I had to do. And then I grew up and began to adult, and I realized how amazing it is. I get to tell my employer, I'm not coming to work one of these days. And I dare you to say something about it because I'm not coming. And it's such a beautiful thing, being able to wake up. Before the pandemic, I'm really active in the church. Before the pandemic, I was in church all day, every day, and the pandemic slowed everyone down. And I think it was during those moments that I realized how sacred the Sabbath was. In that God says, I need you to rest. Rest your body, rest your mind, rest your spirit. And I am a busybody. Anybody that knows me, I always have something to do.
No.
Now that I have a toddler, I really always have something to do. And being able to know that one of those days I'm getting a nap in, and not just that, I'm very intentional. My family's very intentional with going outside and being in nature, even if it's just sitting in our front yard, sitting in the sun, grounding, teaching our daughter how to just
sit in the sun.
And
the California sun?
Yeah.
The one that burns your skin off?
Doesn't burn my skin. But no, I have sunscreen.
Black girl sunscreen.
Right, black girl sunscreen. I think it's really important. So I can't wait to dive into this discussion because I want the world to understand that it's not just a rule. It's not just something that we do. It's something that's within us and it's embedded within us. And it's something that God wanted us to do for our good and not because it was something different.
So when you say it's a rule, I know we kind of hinted on this last episode about it, the 10 Commandments, I don't necessarily look at them as rules in the way that we look at rules today. in the world today, if you break a rule, there's a punishment, right? There's a consequence. The way I look at the Ten Commandments is a design, right? Look at it, we're in 2022. I look at the Ten Commandments as the code for the planet. So God, think about a computer programmer creating code and making this thing work, right? God, the Ten Commandments is the base code for how our world operates. So when you're writing code and an error comes up, another thing happens, or maybe something just stops. In this case, when it just stops, sometimes when you go against what's in the Ten Commandments, the error code could cost you your life. You know what I mean? So I look at the Ten Commandments, and especially number 4 coming from a Sunday observation. I look at it now in a completely different way. Like Sunday, I used to always be like, oh man, I gotta go to church and I gotta get ready for the work week. And even as a kid, I still had reading the Bible, 7th day, every calendar I've ever looked at in America, Sunday was the first day and not the 7th day. So I always had those questions. And after joining the Seventh-day Adventist Church and learning how to really observe the Sabbath, the keep it holy part is more important to me now. And when I say keep it holy, a lot of people think that keeping it holy is only going to church, is not listening to hip hop on Saturday because, it's the Sabbath, or even Friday night, right? But I kind of try to guide my life with, if I wouldn't do it on the Sabbath, then I shouldn't do it on Monday, right? So when I say keep it holy, I just try to make everything or seek the God in everything. So if I'm like, I know some hardcore Adventists will be like, oh, you can't watch basketball on the Sabbath until after sunset. Not I appreciate that God gave these humans the ability to run this fast, to jump this high, and to have this type of hand-eye coordination. I'm so serious. Like, I see it in that manner. Like, that's just what it is for me. Like, I see God, and now I see God in everything, but I'm just on a diatribe, so let you guys get in there.
So I want to challenge that, and not because I think.
Oh yeah, go ahead, challenge. I've been thinking about this challenge. Pull the red flag.
And I want to again say not because I think it's wrong or right, but I have a friend, and it's funny that you said this. So I was like, should I bring this up? Because I know my friend's been watching. So, but I have a friend that she observes her Sabbath based on her relationship with God. So she'll say to God in the beginning of the week, like, what day is my Sabbath? And God will be like, Thursday, you shut everything down.
Oh.
And so on Thursday, she shuts everything down. And it's her and God on Thursday. Mm-hmm. And the first time she told me, I was in such conflict. Mm-hmm. I was like on the edge of my seat. And the Lord was like, that's not for you. I said, okay, it's not for me. And then the more and more I got to know her, the more and more, like, I absolutely know that she shuts it down. And that is her time to commune with God. And then it became like a Sunday so that her whole family can do it. And one time I was actually sat on Saturday and I was like, see where she on the Sabbath? But then I was like, don't say that, that's rude. And so I challenge you in that because, the way that we have been taught is historical. Like, for us, it is a ritual. It is something that has been passed down from generation upon generation from generation. It says in the calendar that the 7th day is the Sabbath. And God even somewhat gives instructions on like what's supposed to be done on that day. So what happens when we, based on our individual walk, interpretate what God is speaking to us, even though it may not necessarily be based on scripture?
Well, I just want to speak to that part. I know this one pastor, he's the pastor of 31st Street SDA here in San Diego, California, and he always says that, it's relational, it's social. Mm-hmm. So what your or your friend's relationship with God is, definitely ain't mine, and it probably will never be. And what mine is vastly different than everyone that's in here right now. So, only part for me that's confusing is with your friend is that she, like, God just gives her a day. That part is kind of got my brain going, which I ain't ready to attack because I don't know.
Your process.
I have to sit on that one for a minute because the only reason is not that it's a bad thing or a good thing. Because then I start thinking about how some people I know believe that we should still be observing ceremonial Sabbaths. And they kind of resort to the Ten Commandments and say, well, if you're keeping Saturday Sabbath or the Seventh-day Sabbath, then you should be keeping the what is it, the Feast of Trumpets, and but that, if you, like, I'm a person, when there's a rule, and if it's a sub rule, then that sub rule says, okay, you can only observe this in this place. Then to observe it outside of that place is breaking said rule, right? So I'm trying to still fight and trying to figure out how to explain that to people. But that's why I don't want to just jump on your friend's idea that God tells her what her Sabbath is, because I also believe it says the seventh day is when the Lord rested. But hey, I'm also a believer that, like, I know a lot of people go around here and they talk about zodiac signs and stuff like that, and people be like, oh, I'm a Leo. No, you are not. Because when these zodiacs were created, the stars were aligned in a completely different manner. So, shut up. So that's how I be thinking. So I don't want to take that. I'm not attacking your friend if you do watch it, if you do hear it. I'm not attacking you. I'm taking into the account that we observe Saturday, and it could actually be that back 2,000 years ago, what we call Saturday could have been Tuesday. So I'm aware.
And that was one of her points too. Like, are you so and I kid you not, and not in a bad way, but it really made me think about what she had to say, because she said, like, are you so caught up on a tradition because it's a tradition and that's what you were raised with? Like, are you really sitting down with God and communing in your Sabbath the way that you should? And I really had to sit down with myself because I'm a busybody on the Sabbath outside of the pandemic. And I was not resting on the Sabbath. And I was not communing with God the way that I needed to. Even now, having a toddler, I'm not even sitting in church. I'm downstairs with the children. Like, I'm not getting the things that, like, a normal person, and I can't say normal people, but, you know, as a parent, I'm not being able to focus. I'm not able to listen and, like, sit still. And so part of the tradition of Sabbath is going to church, and I'm not necessarily present in church during church. And so I do understand where she came, like, where she was coming from when she was speaking to me, because she was like, well, Nicole, are you really observing your Sabbath correctly? And I'm like, oh.
I mean, it's a legit question, though.
Yeah.
Like, you have to ask, but you have to ask yourself that, though, because for I don't speak for me growing up Seventh-day Adventist, like, I have to, because now I'm at a point where, to be honest, I'm in limbo, constant limbo. Now, I haven't done a great job of seeking the right answer, but I am in constant limbo because, am I keeping it because of tradition, and then, like, how do I navigate what God is telling me, what I should do about keep the Sabbath and what I shouldn't, and, like, so I do understand that, and I also do respect your friend, because this is truly her relationship with God. I respect the fact that she is obedient to the Spirit.
Yeah.
You know, and that right there, I mean, that's amazing. I mean, even here, I was like, whoa. Like, I get that point, like the Sabbath, but the fact that she goes into the week and then she asks that specific question, hears from God, I mean, that's just amazing. It shows the obedience that she has to God. But you do have to have that conversation. You have to sit with yourself. What is just tradition? What is not? But I think something that Oscar mentioned that I did like was like, hey, if would I do this any other day? Like pretty much like if I wouldn't do this on Saturday, like I probably shouldn't be doing it Monday through
Sunday through Friday.
Sunday through Friday, you know? And I think that's a legit question, so.
But that's how that's the mindset I use to kind of tune my life versus just how I operate on Saturday. Usually.
But I think that there's something different than, for instance, like when it's your birthday and you're having, great celebration. Is it everything that you could be doing any other day of the week? Absolutely. But the fact that it's your birthday makes it more special. So I kind of differ from you on that aspect in terms of the Sabbath being set apart as something to be more special than the other days. And it just coming back to, again, that relationship. Like when God created the world and let me back up. So we should separate Sabbath from church tradition.
Yeah.
Because church tradition does not always keep the Sabbath, even though we're keeping the 7th day Sabbath. It's a very busy relationship.
Yeah, she just said that right there.
So when we separate those two and just talk about like the actual Sabbath, to me that is the relationship and just being able to have some time to commune with God and it being special and different than your other worship days and your other, daily devotions. It's just like, wow, I have an entire day to not be stressed about work, kids,
that's the thing. I'm gonna tell you,
like anything, bills. Like you can take a moment to de-stress from that.
When Sabbath get here, man, look, be the freest day. Man, the only thing bother me is people on the Sabbath.
I still remember when I was in school, like my classmates would always ask me, they're like, "Wait, you're not studying from Friday to Saturday?" I'm like, "No." And they're like, "How are you still doing well?" I'm like,
"Cause God got me.
But truth be told, though, we should have this Sabbath rest regardless of having that free burden and not stressing about school. Mm-hmm. I was just reading, I think it was Hebrews 4 yesterday.
Yeah.
Hebrews 4, and they talked about like basically.
What are you talking about? I don't want to hear.
Basically, look, if you really believe God as our high priest,
come on now.
Yeah. Then you shouldn't be stressing at all Sunday through Friday anyways. And our pastor already talked about in his service, like our Sabbath rest should be the rest, like it really should be every day of the week. It shouldn't just be Saturday. Like we need to walk our lives having this Sabbath rest, because if we had a Sabbath rest, imagine how much easier our lives would be. And so it's really being intentional about that. I haven't even perfected that, so I don't even know how to I know how to prayer, but the intentionality, like it's a lot of effort to be intentional about stressing. Like for me, look, like I said, I came in, I'm like, hey, I'm just trying to enjoy Sunday. But in the back of my mind, I want to stress about my 3-4 kids I know are going to give me hell tomorrow. I know they are going to give me hell, but like,
Just qualify your job for a moment.
So I'm a first grade teacher, but I got COVID kids that it's really a whole thing. Like you think people joking around though, it's really a whole thing. Like these kids don't know how to be in school. Like it's been 100-something days, but they really don't know. Like they're first graders, but they're really kindergartens. It's a lot. But I shouldn't have to fight that battle, knowing that I serve a high priest who is actually there for me, who's going to provide for me, that's going to provide the patience if I let him, to provide the wisdom, and so on. So, that rest of life should be Sunday through Friday regardless.
So, you brought up Hebrews 4. Thank you. Because I was struggling. I was breaking my Sabbath over here. He was struggling. No, because check me. If you use Hebrews as the context, the point of Hebrews, the author wanted to show that Jesus was better than all of these things.
Yeah.
So he starts off going for the throat, really, saying, I think it's 2, where he says, Jesus is better than Moses. That's a direct attack on Hebrew.
Yeah.
Hebrew religion, culture, spirituality. He goes on to talk about Jesus is better than the high priest.
Yeah.
And then in chapter 4, he brings up the Sabbath, which suggests that the Sabbath falls in the same category as priests, as Moses. The fact that we don't really because of Jesus, need priests anymore. Because of Jesus, we don't need Moses anymore.
Come on.
So chapter 4 would suggest we don't actually need the Sabbath anymore. As long as we need Jesus, as long as we have Jesus.
Mercy,
Because Jesus is Sabbath.
I agree. I agree.
Because it goes back to your Rest of Life series when you talk about how the Sabbath is a mindset. It's a whole lifestyle. I get where people are like, ooh, but I also get where people are like, amen, because the stress of the Pharisees and the prophets and all the people that were interceding for us, they no longer exist for us anymore. We intercede for, God gives us a unique authority in this moment to intercede for ourselves and for us not having a label to be able to intercede for each other. And the Sabbath, at the end of the day, was a chance for us to sit back at the end of the week and look over and say, look at what God's done from Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Yeah.
Here's the thing, when you are in communion with God, you are constantly going to your brothers and sisters and saying, yo, let me just tell you what God did yesterday. And in those moments, those are quiet moments. In those moments, those are peaceful and serene moments. In those moments, you are resting, like, as you are speaking God's word. And so, I get the, like, but I also get the, like, yes, you right, because it's ever-changing. God is so strategic. He's never the same thing at one time. Things are ever going to be evolving.
Yeah. What you got, Janine? I ain't heard you all day. Oh, I need some.
No, my point is mute now.
What I do love is on Hebrews 4 how it's titled. This is through the NLT. It's titled "Promised Rest for God's People," and like that's also the other thing that even these. I mean, out of all the commandments are all good, but this is like a promise. Like that Sabbath, like it's a promise because of how the Israelites worked their butts off, and it's like, hey, like I just need you one day. Like I want you to rest, and it was hard for them because that's all they ever knew was work. But it's like, hey, I need you to rest. But yes, to acknowledge me, but I need you to rest. It's all about our benefit in resting. The Sabbath mindset is about. It's the rest of life, but it's all about resting in God. And so I think that's just something, it's a promise. I think that's the biggest thing, it's a promise.
And there's a physiological effect too for our body. So you definitely want to encourage some form of rest. But when it comes to the Sabbath, then it comes back to me to worship. And it's really, like you get into this territory, the back of my mind is this great controversy and how it's going to come all down to worship and everyone having their own interpretation of what God is saying. Whereas in the, Exodus 20, he was very specific. And then 21, very specific. Like all these rules and things that's coming through, like God didn't really leave room for a whole lot of interpretation. And we are the ones who've been trying to add on all these interpretations. Like he said,
well, then it goes to are you seeking?
But that's what the brain does, though.
Yeah.
That's what the human brain does. You're gonna get information, and if that information attacks something you're doing, then you try to rationalize and bend that information to make it fit what you're doing.
But I was gonna say, I think he says remember, like, to keep it holy, because that's something that we were going to need to remember to do.
I think the part with remember is that we take the preparation element out of the Sabbath. Like we all think that's like, oh, we just got to get through the work week and then there's Sabbath. But like we're talking about in our relationships, nurturing it daily, having a sense of Sabbath daily, so that when you come to the 7th-day Sabbath for us, right, we're actually able to experience. Have you ever tried to prepare for, like, okay, you have an exam, you need to go to bed early, right? When you have that mindset that I need to get more sleep so I will be better, your body is able to feel that, and then you experience it differently. So if throughout the week you're preparing yourself for another opportunity to commune in a Sabbath sense through meditation, through prayer, through, through conversation also, because that's the other component of Sabbath is the social aspect that we already started to hit on. So remember is not just remember on the day, it's remember every single day. And that's the level of preparation I think we sometimes skip, but was also the benefit of tradition because it's routine.
That's so good because even if you're exercising, just what you said, if you were to exercise or have something coming up and all you did was rest one day, you're going to be exhausted.
Yeah.
And I think that's why a lot of people who try to keep the Sabbath holy are so exhausted because they're only trying to rest one day.
Yeah.
And that's exhausting.
Here's something too that we also have to remember, like in Mark, I got it pulled up, Mark chapter 2, verse 27, where it says, the Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath.
Yeah.
So it's like you guys have continuously said, it is given to us. Like if we go back to Genesis and look at the creation, on the seventh day, God rested, right? And it's not as if God was tired. It's not as if God was worn out. He was literally building the house, right? So the key thing when building anything from ground up is a foundation. So when God rested from creating every living thing that we see, it wasn't like, oh man, whew, I made it to the seventh day. And because he is all time, like God does not see time in a linear aspect. He sees the past and the future at the same time. He knew that in 2022, people were going to not know how to rest. We live in a time right now where people, they have to legislate time off into people's schedule now. Like I think California just passed, or it might be at the House, where they're trying to give you a 32-hour work week. So it's that bad where we get so tied up because, believe it, to me, when you don't keep the Sabbath, and by keeping the Sabbath, remembering that you need to rest daily, that you need to focus on God daily, that you need to pray without ceasing, and then on the seventh day, keeping it holy and just enjoying being around like-minded people, worshiping, and doing all of those things. Because of that, like, I went blank. I went blank. I definitely went blank.
I've been looking at the verse. Man is not made, like Sabbath is made for man, and not man for the Sabbath. I think that's so very important, especially for our mental health. One of my favorite parts of growing up in a black church, not even just Adventist, because I visit all kind of black churches and we are the same, except for the ones that may dance and we don't really do all that dancing, but still dance. I mean, I dance too, but I mean, like, at the same time, I love, no shade to any other churches, but I love the growing up and being raised in a black church because the essence of worship is very real within our spirit, and I think that's resting. Like, music is restful for me, even when it is uppity and like with the beat. It is therapeutic. It's therapeutic. It does, and it's a love language, and I think the Sabbath is a love language. Like, and I love being around, like, I look forward to the Sabbath. I look forward to seeing Janine. I look forward to seeing Alana. I look forward to seeing all of you guys on the Sabbath. And when you guys are not around, I'm like, where's my friend at?
Well, it's one person that you never got to worry about that.
But I say that to say because God knew that. God knew that we were going to have to feel at home in our environment. And I think that's one of the greatest parts of, like, the tradition of keeping the Sabbath is the tradition of being able to love on each other and to lift each other up and to pray for each other intentionally and be able to just do things that we can't, like, do Monday through Friday or Sunday through Friday. And we can, right? Because if I need something, I'm texting, I'm calling, I'm this, but there ain't nothing like you need at 12 o'clock in front of the church. You know what I mean? We giving hugs and how's your week? It's very genuine. And so I love the fact that God was like, I made this for you.
But back what I was gonna say, I remember
Okay.
it was about God seeing past, present, and future all at the same time. That's where I was. But you know, y'all don't know, but everybody here knows. I get to talking and I forget, and I'm starting to do it again. But anyway, point. Because when he was during creation on the seventh day, he was able to see that there was going to be a time where people were going to forget to rest, because that's how awesome God is. So that is what it was. The Sabbath wasn't because God was tired. It was because he wanted to instill or leave a record that, hey, there is a time to rest. So that is kind of what I would want. The big main point I wanted to get out is that, you know, it's always a time to rest. Whether you find a little rest from Saturday to Friday and then do whatever you do for worship, but you always got to find some time to rest. And when you find that, and during that time for rest, please focus on the Creator.
So that's why I have two questions for like everybody up here. One was, when we say keep it holy, like what does that mean for you to keep the Sabbath holy? And then the other question kind of goes back, because when I started thinking about it, I started going back to my childhood, and I was like, what did it mean, especially since you have a child, so I'm really curious, to explain the Sabbath to that child, and what takeaways, I guess, are they coming away with it? Because I know like when I was growing up, there was a part of it that was, as Seventh-day Adventists, there's just so many things that we weren't doing. And it was a deterrent. Yeah.
Let's clarify, black Seventh-day Adventists.
It was a deterrent to having some school friends, because sometimes you just want to have to explain like why you're not going to do, like, I can't be bothered. I was that kid. I can't be bothered with explaining everything, so I'm just going to not chill with y'all. So, but as I grew up, then that, you know, ideal kind of changed for me. So I'm just kind of curious, because I mean, if you're out there loving me, I know you guys are grounding and having, so I'm sure Zara has a much different Sabbath experience, whereas mine was in church, like literally from Friday night to Sunday morning, because we had choir rehearsal Friday, church Sabbath, then we had lunch together all at somebody's house, we had AYS, we had social, then we had Pathfinders the next Sunday morning, so it was...
Can I attack that part for a second? So that's always strange to me.
Yeah.
That the Sabbath is a day for rest. But we decide on that day and on the night of, or Friday, we're going to do choir practice. We're going to come and do this for the church. We're going to do this. And say we're observing the Sabbath. Like, you can't have it both ways in God's word. You can't. Either you going to do what he asked you to do, or you going to do what you want to do. So if it's rest, then why are you having all this stuff when Sabbath is supposed to start? Like, why are we doing that? It don't make sense. Like, trust me, I'm naive to it, because I grew up Providence Baptist Church, Wayman Chapel AME Church, and please leave these AME people, they pretty strict too. But it was a different type of strict. So I'm just trying to understand that part. Like, how can we sit up here and be like, oh, we rest on the Sabbath, but
we do A, B, and C.
Yeah, you got a whole full-time job on Friday and Saturday.
I was about to say,
yeah, we were taught that growing up. That's the rest part.
It's a slave mentality. The honest to God truth is, we go back to slavery, and the master said, I'm giving you this amount of time to be with your friends and your family and your loved ones. So we have been conditioned to put all that in. And even if you don't go to church, when do you spend the time with your family? It's Friday through Sunday. You're always with, like, I think that's a mentality that we have been taught, and it's been passed down from generation to generation.
I kind of got to fight against that too.
The file wall is itching right now. Man.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. He who shall not be named.
He who shall not be named. So, Nicole, I affirm what you said. I also think that that's something that may be unique to our denomination, because we pick and choose what is okay traditionally to do. So case in point, if you are a medical worker,
Listen, you can
you can be a doctor and a nurse and work on Sabbath. You can be on call, and we won't bat an eye.
military.
But military won't bat an eye. But let you be a school teacher. Let you be a mechanic.
A McDonald's worker.
Absolutely. I really believe it's something that's unique to our denomination's tradition. We just see it funny, and then we justify anything that seems to be ministry related is no longer working. So if I am preparing to sing on Sabbath, what better time to do it than the Sabbath?
The 6 days before.
But I'll challenge that even. What God sees as work may not be what we see as work. So John chapter 5, Pharisees are challenging Jesus. Jesus says to them, Jesus is challenging them on what the word actually is. And in response to that, Jesus actually says that God has never stopped working. They threw out Genesis at Jesus. Hey, God, the Father rested on the seventh day. Jesus was like, my dad has never stopped working from the beginning of time. He has worked through every Sabbath. And even biblically speaking, just the historical biblical record, most of Jesus' miracles are recorded on the Sabbath.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do we walk that line?
And can I just say, Jesus was out there with the people. Like he was not at church on Sabbath. He was healing the sick. He was raising the dead. He was stopping a woman from having.
Preaching too.
He was preaching. He was
I think it's the time. It's the timing.
But let's not. Like, I don't want to get in the habit of saying, "Oh, Jesus was doing all this on the Sabbath," but as if he wasn't delivering a message on the Sabbath as well. Like we can't just focus in on. He was only
delivering the message, like justify.
No. I'm just saying. Like all I'm saying is, we can't try to separate. To me, you can't try to separate the two because they go hand in hand. Yes, he healed. He did miracles on the Sabbath. He also ministered on the Sabbath. So that's all I'm saying.
I wanna give a scenario. I used to really be heavy in the community, and they had a lot of stuff on the Sabbath, and I would go Juneteenth celebrations. I'm there. Martin Luther King March. I'm there, and I remember church people being like, "You went?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I went. Like, I'm not gonna go. How are we gonna get out there in the community if we don't get out there in the community?" And then I think about Jesus. Jesus did the exact same thing. And I'm not justifying my actions, but what I am saying is, I think it is time for us to think outside of the box. If we're trying to get people to know who God is and know who Christ is, we ain't gonna meet them at this church when we're here at 11 o'clock every Sabbath.
Go ahead.
At what point, we did this last year, which I really appreciated, and I think we need to do this again, but we went out on Juneteenth. Some of us were at church, some of us were out in the field. That, I think, is what the Sabbath needs to look like. And it didn't mean that I didn't get to rest, because when we were done, I got to go home and rest. And before I went, I got to go home and rest. And then I was able to go out and have a good time. And ministry is ministry. When people are walking up to us, they're talking to us about our lives, they're talking to us about our testimony. I believe that we have to get out of these four walls. It's time. If God is coming home soon, we cannot sit here and argue about what's right and what's wrong. We need to act. I truly think that's what's going to get people coming into our church. And not because we want to convert people, but because we want people to be in freedom. And if we have the message of freedom, how do we get that out to them if we're so strictly trying to do the things that we've been taught and keeping the Sabbath?
I think it's a time. It's like one of those things where it's a time and a place where not everybody is meant to always be in the four walls. Like you're saying, there's some people who need to be out in the field, and they might not come to church, but guess what? They're out in the field because that is what they need to be doing. But I think everybody has their thing, and it's okay that people are ministering outside the walls in like not coming to church. But I think something you said is important is it's like, yes, you're going out and you're talking to people, but it's the lifestyle that you're living. It's what they see when you're being nice, the kindness, the showing the fruits of the Spirit. I relate to that heavily because yesterday, I've done this a couple times. But one of my students, I had a couple students invite me to a birthday party. Yesterday, I was at one of my students' rugby games. To me, that is ministering to them and their family because that's showing them like, hey, like, yeah, your kid is my student, but your kid is more than just a job to me. Right. You know, it's letting them know like, hey, like, oh, yesterday, like, it was like, oh yeah, you sing on, I heard that you sing, like, yeah, you know, I joke around with the kids, but I also sing on Saturday at such and such church. And it's like that ministering part, but I feel like that's not talked about enough. It's like shamed upon. And I think we kind of have to get out of that, like you're saying, but at the end of the day, when we're ministering, whether it's in the church or outside, it's all about our love that we have, and people will eventually know about it. We don't have to just go and preach like the 3 angel message stuff. It's not always that, but it's something about it's about the love that you show and the fruits of the Spirit that you display when interacting with people.
So with that, like, so what about the other 6 days? Like, I believe in what you're saying. There are some people that are made, and some people may feel like I'm that type of personality that's made to go out there and be in the streets and talk to people and, you know, talk to them about God, talk to them about all the great things that He's done. But what I don't want the listeners to think is that Sabbath is the only, or when we're observing the Sabbath, that's the only time you can do that. You should be doing that regardless.
I don't think anybody's saying
the opposite point. I think what we're saying is that the Sabbath is not so exclusive that we can't do those things at the same time.
And you got to remember, with me, you're talking to someone that hasn't been born and reared in this community. So to me, I'm going to come to church, and when I leave church, I'm going to talk to people. I'm going to be in these streets, for lack of a better phrase. I'm going to be out here, and I'm going to be talking to people. So, like, being in the field is, to me, that's what I do. Y'all, I talk. And if I see you on the Sabbath, they're going to be like, what's up?
I think there's a couple of things that comes into play with, like, yeah, it should be happening with the other 6 days, but I think when you incorporate you having to work and do all those things, your time is now limited to a certain extent versus.
But
I'm not saying that you still can't minister. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying the time that you would have for Sabbath versus the time you have on these other 6 days, to me, is just like, it's a little bit more time restricting. I'm just saying you can't do. I'm just saying you can't do as much, but it's a challenge.
There's 24 hours in every day. 24 hours in every day.
So I think Jelani, with what you said, I don't think you realize that you teaching during the week is ministry.
Yeah.
Like, you wouldn't have had that opportunity to go to the person's game if you didn't have that connection. So I think that's part of the wall that some of us have to get past, where at the end of the day, whether you're in the school, in the hospital, or in the church, in the office, like, your Sabbath is there, Jesus is there, and that's where you connect. It's what is it? What's the equation? Rules with no relationship equals rebellion. Yes. So God,
I ain't never heard that.
Rules with no relationship equals rebellion. Wherever God has placed you, like being a teacher is just as spiritual as being an elder.
I mean, they call Jesus rabbi.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
rabbi means teacher.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So it's like, what we have to change what we see as ministry. Because if we were to even use the beginning, and this is just me, the most constant ministry of God is the ministry of presence. Like, and probably one of the most forthright promises. I will never leave you, nor forsake you. He's like, I may not always do what you think what you want me to do, but one thing I will do is be there for you.
Yeah.
So if God blesses you with a job and you go to that job every day, your presence there, and that's a mindset you have to have that I think does come with Sabbath. I am there not just to get this money, to get the bag. I am actually an agent that God has implanted
Absolutely.
in the movie.
007.
It's funny that you say that because I applied for a new position recently and it's such a great position. And Lord, if you just granted, amen. But one of the things, one of my youth, I work with 18 to 21-year-olds, 24-year-olds, and because my job is so sensitive, it's something that I felt the need to share with them as I'm going through this process because I'm not about to tell you in 2 weeks I'm leaving. I need to sit down and have these conversations ahead of time so that you guys know, like, I'm not just leaving you, but this is what's going on. So one of my kids said to me, so what if you don't get it? And I said, well, that just means my assignment year isn't done. And the kid said back, he said, so now I'm your assignment? And I said, of course. I said, no, I didn't mean it like that, but what I meant was, whatever I'm supposed to do here, it's not done. And I'm okay with that. And he looked, he said, you're okay with that, even though you don't make this money? And I was like, that's okay, God always provides for me.
Always.
And that's what I do know, and that's what I will always know. And the kid was like, Nicole, you're right, because I can see you with your nose done. And I saw that purse, and I was like, first of all, that purse wasn't that expensive, but okay.
Yeah, so I think we labored on the fourth one.
Yeah.
And that could be an entire episode itself. And maybe one day it will be. But it's the 10 laws of power, so we got 6 more to get to.
You got 15 minutes for this next one.
All right. So with the 5th one, which is honor your mother and thy father.
Ooh.
Can I just propose that we segue into this the next time as well if we don't finish in 15 minutes? Because this one is, I think, really...
What is honoring your mother and your father? What does that mean?
Can you read the whole commandment though? For context.
Yeah.
You read it, Denise. You over here.
Your days may be long.
Yeah.
If you come from Caribbean heritage,
Yes, we know the
that part is very, very stressful. So I think that we need to just
Because they use that. They use that joint as a threat. That's why.
But it ain't even Caribbean, dude, because my mama definitely,
Same.
I think it might be a black thing. It might be a black thing. So, yeah, but did you want to read it?
Say speak to that.
No, I thought you already had it
I
up.
don't have it up.
No, I don't.
Okay, hold on. Exodus. What is it?
Exodus 20.
Okay, Exodus 20.
Why didn't you?
Yeah. Sometimes the brain don't work.
Okay, so it says.
Oh, you got it.
Says, honor your father and mother, then you will live a long, full life in the land of the Lord your God is giving you.
Oh. If we just broke that entire thing down. I want to go back to Austin. What does it mean to honor?
I think the honor part is multifaceted. Let's just start there. I don't think it's a simple explanation that you can just switch it out with one word. I think part of it is acknowledging the wisdom that your parents have simply by experiencing things you have yet to experience, or in a different way. So acknowledge that your mother and father have some type of wisdom they can impart to you, and whether the scenario be the exact same or different, there is a lesson in that you can glean from. And how that will help you to live long is that you can reflect on their experiences. So perhaps as you choose, because God is a God of choice, choose how you will go down your own path. You may encounter less difficulty.
Yeah.
So mom and dad, in case you're listening, I heard you and I get it. So I think part of honoring your parents is to acknowledge the wisdom that they have been through, so that way you can have a less challenging experience as you go forward.
Just a step further in that regard is our parents, all of our parents, I believe, raised us to the best of their ability, right? As we get older, we look back and we say, man, they probably could have did this different or did that different. Also honoring them is being willing to understand, like, hey, you did the best that you could with the information and the resources that you had. And whatever I feel like was wrong, I forgive you for it. Because I believe some of them beatings I got, I shouldn't have got.
Okay.
Just putting that out there. And I know you listening, Mom and Dad.
I also now I want to come from a different perspective because I think this has to be talked about in the Black family. What happens when your parents led you through a trauma lens and you can't sit here, and I'm not talking about my parents, I'm not talking about any parents in specific, but what I know is I work with us and I see the pain that we have, and I see oftentimes, even on social media, I'm breaking generational curses. I will not do what my mom did. I will be better than my parents. And there's something very heartbreaking for someone that does not understand what it means to honor their parents because they cannot get past the pain that they feel like their parents caused. But that also means they can't get past the pain that their parents themselves were experiencing.
And that's the part, that's what I was kind of speaking. Like, look at my mom was born in the 1950s. So,
One time.
as a black woman or a black girl in the 1950s in Alabama, Selma, Alabama,
Mercy, Lord.
it's certain things that not only my mom but my father also. He was born in the 50s, and he was a black boy in Selma, Alabama. Growing up in that place during that time, there are certain things that they went through that I will never have to go through, that I will probably never see anyone else go through. So, and that's why I was saying you have to be willing to forgive, because in order to forgive, you gotta, knowledge will help, for me, helps me forgive. So now I'm able to look back and know that in the 1950s in Selma, Alabama, it was bad for everybody, blacks and white, mainly black people. So like my mom's dad was ran out of Selma because a white man said something to my grandmother. And he pulled a knife out of him. So they had to sneak him in and out of town at sundown so he could see his kids at night. Those are the type of things my parents grew up, the trauma my mom saw, and some of the things my dad saw when they were growing up. So when they have kids, what they're saying is, I don't ever want my kid to have to experience that. So in order to stop me and my sister and my brothers from experiencing that, mainly my older sibling, they ruled him with the iron fist. The fist got a little softer with me. It was more like, what is it, clay and iron? You know what I'm saying? It was a little soft, and I appreciate that. But understanding that because that's how they grew up. Because like my mama used to, I'm not gonna put you out, Mom. But understanding that is the environment they grew up in. I have to now, at 34, understand that had they grew up in this time, like me, I wouldn't have been raised the way that I was raised. And I think I might have told you guys that I thank God for the butt whoopings my mom and dad gave me, because those are the reasons I'm not in prison now. So I know a lot of people, when they say I'm breaking generational curses with their children, when they say that, they think about, they're a lot of times talking about the chastisement and the correction of their children. But please take into account that the whoopings that your mom, your parents gave you probably are the reason you the person you are right now. Maybe it's because that's the reason you're successful. Instead of looking back and hating that it happened, just appreciate it and understand that was a mistake. But appreciate, just know that that came from a place of love from them.
Yeah.
It wasn't to break you down. It was to 100% try to build you up.
Yeah, and that's ideal. Because there are some malicious.
There are.
There are.
Yeah, there are. It's not 100%. It's not 100%.
Many of us have been blessed with loving parents, but a lot of people have not.
Yeah.
I think that what Janine said was important, that you really have to, for that word honor, it's really contextual, because even, and I think we touched on this last time, all of these commandments are actually contextual.
Yeah.
Moses ain't actually talking to any of us.
No.
God's not actually talking to any of us directly through these. And even in the promise, honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the earth, upon the land that the Lord should. They're about to go into the promised land. Mm-hmm. If you want to make it to the promised land, listen to your parents. Yeah. I think that a contemporary way to apply this particular commandment is just what you're saying. And one of the most difficult forgivenesses to dispense is forgiving a parent for doing their best.
Yes.
Because sometimes their best was trash.
Yeah.
Like, we are the way we are, a lot of it because of our parents. And I this is just my own personal conviction. One of the greatest ways you can honor your parents is to try to give them grace for being human.
Yeah.
And especially as you become an adult yourself and begin to see things as
you have to move with different situations,
and you're like, my parents were way farther from perfect than I realized. And am I going to be okay when I see the immaturity in my own parents? And am I going to be loving towards it? Or am I going to just be callous? So, yeah.
And on the other side of that too is, you get to, as you grow older, you get to see some of the things, like for me, my parents, the fact that my mom and dad, when I played sports, they showed up to most of my sporting events. My dad worked swing shift. My mom was putting in about 62 hours a week. Like, as an adult now, understanding what 62 hours of a work week is, and make it to your child's game or multiple games, because I played baseball, football, basketball, soccer. I did all of that. And they were there. So, yes, on what you just said. But also, understand that here you are, you working 42, and on Thursday, you are worn out. They did 65, 70, and was at all of your sporting events. Be willing to just take the time, and to me, this is what honoring is. Take the time to be like, hey, I just want to say I appreciate you being there.
Absolutely.
And respect.
Yeah.
I just want to affirm that, because that's living the long days. Being able to give the thankfulness, being able to say thank you, being able to be at peace with what your parents did not do, or the things that your parents did when they hurt you, being able to let that go, being able to forgive. That is the long days, because when we are caught up in that hurt and that pain, I had an uncle tell me recently to let something go, and immediately I was like, okay, and I said, God, and he said, let me pray with you right now. He prayed with me, and in that moment, I said, oh, I feel lighter. I felt physically lighter. When we carry our burdens, they are heavy, and they take place, and they destroy our bodies. And our parents are some of the first people that showed us what pain looks like.
Yeah.
We as a people, especially God's children, we have to let it go, and that's what honoring is.
Cool.
Period. And that's where we get the long life, because I'm trying to live till I'm like 125 years old.
And also remember that your life extends beyond you. So there's a scripture, I can't recall exactly where it is, but it says, they're talking about the blessings and the curses. And it says the curse is going to follow you for generation and generation. And I think it said like 4 generations or something like that. Yeah, 3 or 4. And it said the blessings for thousands of generations.
Yeah.
So that honoring your parents is getting that blessing to continue not only through you, but through your next generation, the next generation after that. I strongly believe I live a blessed life because of what my great grandparents have done in their relationship with the Most High. Did I know them? No, but I feel like we benefit from it.
Absolutely, we do.
Yeah, well, we go. That was a great point. So we're gonna close it out. Of course, we did 9 to get through. I promise you, we only got one more part.
I told you the timing, man.
But with that, you know, we're gonna close out. You guys can say your name and your social if you want to.
Alvona. It's Alvona White with a Y.
Mine, I think, is Nicole_C_Chum. JJ_She-Dog on Instagram. Funny BBY on.
Please like, comment, share, and subscribe.
Yeah, that too. And I'm Oscar, man, the forgotten one. So with that, man, I hope we can see y'all. I hope y'all join us for the next episode. Peace.
Our love goes hand in the mountain top. Oh, our love it soars wider than expanding space. There's no limits no more. It goes deeper than the ocean floor.